London is the only one I have to love in this world. The words dropped from Jin's mouth like a quiet bombshell. At that very moment, the O2 Arena fell into a collective silence, not because the audience didn't understand what was happening, but because they understood it all too well. What did he really mean? Was it just a passing remark, or was this the most emotionally loaded declaration Jin has ever made in public? Thousands of fans, tightly packed across one of the world's most iconic stages, were not prepared for that sentence. And the impact it left behind is still reverberating across the ARMY community worldwide. This wasn't just a concert. This wasn't just a stop in the world tour. This was a confession, raw, unexpected, and hauntingly beautiful in a world where idols often speak in rehearsed gratitude and polished phrases. Jin chose a completely different path. No translator was needed. No fan sign was held up to prompt the moment. No media cue was expected. Jin stood under a single spotlight, staring into the London crowd, and simply said what was sitting on his chest. What followed next was indescribable. Thousands of fans sobbing uncontrollably, overwhelmed by the brutal honesty of an idol who had carried too much for too long in silence. What kind of emotional weight must Jin have been carrying to say such a thing? Every fan in that venue knew, or at least felt, that this wasn't just about London. It was about something deeper, something that couldn't be masked by stage lighting or drowned by loud music. Jin, a global superstar standing alone in a foreign city, looked into the sea of purple lights and made a declaration that felt more personal than any song lyric ever could. Was it a metaphor? A silent cry for something the world hadn't yet seen? Or was it simply the most honest thing he could say in a moment where no script or choreography stood between him and the crowd? Some ARMYs who were there that night recounted that the silence after Jin spoke was deafening. Even the band paused for a few seconds longer than usual, as though everyone on stage felt the gravity of what had just been said. Others described the way Jin's voice cracked slightly, not from a technical mishap, but from holding back emotions he never planned to reveal on stage. And what did Jin see in the crowd that triggered such a confession? Perhaps it was the group of fans who waited 19 hours outside the venue just to be front row. Perhaps it was the banner that read, "You waited for us, now we wait forever for you." Or maybe it was the unspoken bond that filled the air, the kind of bond that cannot be rehearsed, replicated, or commercialized. For the first time in years, Jin didn't sound like an idol. He sounded like a human being who had found a rare kind of safety in a sea of strangers. The phrase, "London is the only one I have to love in this world," has now become more than a quote. It's become a symbol, a line etched into ARMY's hearts, a tattoo in their memories. But with that love came worry, because if London is the only thing he has to love, what did he lose along the way? In the hours following the concert, social media exploded. Fans from all around the globe posted reactions, crying videos, breakdown threads trying to analyze the emotional depth of Jin's words. Some speculated that the line was a reflection of isolation, that despite being surrounded by millions, Jin may be feeling emotionally alone. Others saw it as an acknowledgement of the healing power that the London crowd gave him that night. Yet all of them agreed on one thing. Something inside Jin shifted during that performance. Even ARMYs who watched from live streams or fan cams could feel it. His voice, usually polished and controlled, trembled with every word of his solo encore. He wasn't just singing anymore. He was testifying. Some fans described his posture as different that night, no longer performing, but releasing. A kind of catharsis that can only come from emotional surrender. What's more shocking is that Jin, known for his humor and emotional restraint, has never made such a direct statement before. He has often spoken about gratitude, about love for fans, about missing his members during military service. But never had he singled out a city and called it the only one he had left to love. Why London? Why now? There's no confirmed answer. But the timing was impossible to ignore. This concert marked a significant milestone, his largest solo audience to date, and the emotional weight of it being the first time he stood on stage alone at the legendary O2 Arena. With no BTS members beside him, and only ARMY in front of him, the emotional pressure must have been immense. The spotlight no longer had 7 people to share it. It was just him and them. No middle ground. No escape. Some insiders close to the production team reported that Jin had spent an unusually long time alone in his dressing room before the show. No media interviews. No backstage interactions. Just quiet. Focused. Possibly preparing himself not just physically, but emotionally for what he knew was coming. Did he already know he would say those words? Was this part of his inner monologue that finally leaked onto the surface after holding back for too long? Fans have also pointed out a specific moment in the show, right after singing Epiphany, a song about self-love and identity, where Jin paused for over 30 seconds. No speaking, just breathing, eyes closed, head tilted to the sky as if trying to contain everything that was about to erupt. When he finally opened his eyes and looked at the crowd, he whispered it. Quietly, calmly, fatally. London is the only one I have to love in this world. What do you do with a statement like that? Do you celebrate it as a love letter? Or do you mourn it as a sign of emotional fatigue? The fans' reaction proves one thing. This was no ordinary moment. No PR stand. No dramatización. It was a real, human unraveling, and ARMY felt it to their bones today and the hours that followed. Hashtag Only London for Jin and hashtag Jin Said I Love You trended globally. But the internet cannot carry the full weight of what was said. It happened in a space, in a moment, in a breath that can't be replayed. Because it wasn't just about the words, it was about the silence that followed. Perhaps Jin didn't mean London literally. Perhaps it was a symbol, a metaphor for a place where he felt safe, understood, and finally allowed to be vulnerable. But whether it was metaphor or not, the truth is this. He said it. He gave it to the world. And now the world must carry it with care. So now the question echoes across every ARMY heart. What led him to say it? And what does it mean for what comes next? Was it a goodbye? A beginning? A cry for something we've all been missing? Or was it simply a reminder that even the brightest stars in the world sometimes have only one place left where they can feel loved? We may never know the full answer, but we know what we felt. And the tears that filled the O2 Arena weren't from joy or sadness alone. They were from understanding. Deep, painful, healing understanding. And maybe that's what Jin wanted all along. The next morning, London didn't wake up to just another trending topic. It woke up to a wound that had opened, not just in Jin, but in ARMY itself. Fans who were physically present reported waking up with swollen eyes and aching hearts. Many said they couldn't shake off the feeling that something deeply personal had been shared with them, and now they carried a kind of emotional responsibility. It was no longer about being a spectator. It had become something else entirely. The emotional gravity of the moment wasn't about the theatrics, nor the fan service. It was about the rare glimpse behind the global icon, into the soul of a man who has given more than a decade of his life to the stage, yet in one moment revealed that perhaps love, real love, felt like it only existed in one place, London. Critics might argue that fans are reading too much into a single line. But those who have followed Jin closely know this. He is not careless with words. And in the quiet aftermath of that performance, even the press, who usually chase headlines with hyperbole, chose silence, as if anything they wrote would fall short of capturing what happened. Even now, days later, the footage from that night continues to spread like wildfire, shared again and again, not for entertainment, but for remembrance. Fans are looping that exact second, analyzing his breath, his eyes, his stillness. They're searching for clues, for anything that might explain what he meant. Not out of obsession, but out of care, out of love. The kind of love that feels urgent when you sense someone might be carrying pain they can no longer mask. Because make no mistake, that statement didn't come from a place of comfort. It came from vulnerability. And for someone like Jin, who has spent years mastering the art of protecting others from his own struggles, this wasn't just a lapse. It was a collapse, a release. And now the world is left to decide how to respond. Do we reduce it to a viral moment, or do we honor it as a turning point? In the hours after the show, the O2 Arena itself became something of a sacred site. Fans returned there even after the concert was over, standing outside its walls, some in silence, others singing softly into the night. Many held signs with just one line written, "We love you more than London." Others simply stood there, letting the emotion settle. No selfies, no shouting, just presence. For an industry built on noise, Jin gave us something far more rare, stillness. And in that stillness, he gave us honesty. Fragile, unfiltered, unplanned. It is not often that a moment like this defines a city's relationship with an artist, but London now holds a different weight in the BTS universe. It is no longer just a stop on a tour map. It has become a chapter, a symbol, a question mark, because even now, the question remains unanswered. What did Jin mean by that? And what does it say about the life he's been living outside the spotlight? What pain was he masking behind the laughter? What kind of love does an artist hold on to when the rest of the world only sees the persona? Perhaps we will never hear those answers. Perhaps Jin will never elaborate, and perhaps he doesn't have to. Because in a world obsessed with overexposure, he gave just enough to make people feel, and maybe that was the point. As the final echoes of that night continued to ripple through the global fandom, one thing is painfully clear. Jin's heart was never fully on that stage. It was somewhere else. Maybe still searching. Maybe already decided. And in the deepest part of that truth, ARMY is left wondering, if London is the only one he is left to love, who, then, is left to love him back?